Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Mon nom est Christian Noumi. My name is Christian Noumi. I am a bilingual research and evaluation associate at FSC, a Future Skills Center. I'm honored to welcome you today to today's webinar on advancing inclusion learning with Black communities in Canada. This session is part of our ongoing effort to work to explore how we can build an inclusive, equitable skills development ecosystem, one that acknowledges and addresses systemic barriers faced by Black communities. I will go through our agenda, land acknowledgement, housekeeping, introducing our speaker and panelist. This webinar is scheduled for about 60 minutes. A presentation by Diversity Institute will set the stage for our conversation. Then a panel featuring two of our partners from the University of Alberta and from Monumental will engage in a deep discussion about the topic of the day. We'll discuss, we'll obviously have a Q&A period, and we are going to wrap up with some closing remarks and a short survey. Before going through some housekeeping, I would like to take the time for a land acknowledgement. Given that FSC is hosting this event, the land acknowledgement is specific to Toronto. However, I encourage all of you, wherever you are joining us from, to reflect and acknowledge the specific land you are currently located in. So the Future Skills Center acknowledges that Toronto is situated upon traditional and current Indigenous territories that include the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. The treaties that cover these territories include the Dish with One Spoon, Wampum, Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes and the Upper Canada treaties. Now, a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be shared with the registered attendees in the next few days. We encourage you to interact with us using Q&A option in the Zoom screen panel. And feel free to engage in French and English. Nous souhaitons une bienvenue particulière à nos participants francophones. Simultaneous interpretation services in French and in English are available at the bottom of your Zoom screen. By default, it's in English, but you can switch to French if you prefer. Before introducing our speaker and panelists, a little bit of self-promotion, obviously. We hope that in addition to attending this webinar, you can also join us on June 10th at 11 for a peer learning group on advancing inclusion. Let me introduce you to our speaker and panelist. Nancy Mitchell is Director of Research Special Projects at Diversity Institute. Nancy will have a presentation in a moment. Laura McDonald, FSC's Associate Director of Knowledge Mobilization and Insights. She will moderate the panel discussion that will feature two of our funded partners, Andre McDonald, a professor at the University of Alberta and the director of the Elite Program for Black Youth, and Kofi Hope, the CEO and co-founder of Monumental. Now, it's my pleasure to give the floor to Nancy Mitchell for her presentation. Take it away, Nancy.
Amazing. Okay, thank you so much. Let me just pull up my screen. So thanks again for having me and for the warm introduction. I'm really excited to be here to speak about our SOBER report, State of Black Economics. It really presents a fulsome picture of updated data, both qualitative and quantitative, on diverse Black experiences and what I'm calling the pipeline of experiences. So from education at an early age to post-secondary education, to employment, to leadership roles, to entrepreneurship. And throughout, I've sprinkled some of the learnings that we have from our work-integrated learning efforts, although I will say that I know FSC is having another session on June 10th, and my colleague Laureen Williams will be there to dive more into that. I only have 10 to 15 minutes, so I'll try to go slow, but also give you as much information. But what I did do is I cut some of the slides out, but you were provided the slides in advance, so the ones that I'm not going to be presenting on, you can still see them in your deck. A little bit about us. So, the Diversity Institute was founded in 1999. And just very briefly, we do research on equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility in the labor market. We work with FSC on a number of different reports. But then what's really important to us is we take these learnings and we support organizations, clients, et cetera, in developing strategies that actually embed inclusion into their processes. Because we always want to take what we have from the research and ensure that it doesn't just live on the shelf, that it's actually used for organizations, used for work integrated learning opportunities, et cetera. A little bit on the State of Black Economics report. So it was published in 2025, so this year. It's in English and French. And I think it's a really important report because we know that data is not always available and it's not always disaggregated to understand the experiences of Black communities. And even when it is, sometimes it's not accessible, even just in the language or the way it's presented. And I will be upfront and say that I am not a data analyst. So something that's really important to me when I'm presenting data is it needs to be understandable and tangible for people who don't know about regression theories and all that kind of stuff. The report has information on education, employment, leadership, and opportunity and entrepreneurship, as well as opportunities for change. And it leverages Statistics Canada, Diversity Institute resources, and other resources to create more of a fulsome picture of quantitative and qualitative experiences. Recognizing, side note, that while it speaks to the quote unquote Black experience, Black people are not homogenous, and we need to recognize gender differences, the experiences of newcomers, et cetera. Just a little bit on our work. So to contextualize it, a lot of our data advocacy on understanding Black experiences is also in the context of our work with the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. We were in Geneva last year presenting on the importance of understanding the experiences of Black women in the labor market and leveraging data for that. And then we did 2 sessions this year on the global pushback on EDI, as well as the findings from the SOBER report. So just to contextualize it with our work with the UN Permanent Forum. Okay, so let's dive right in. I want to talk to you a little bit about educational disparities for Black individuals. And throughout this presentation, what I will do is paint a realistic picture of the barriers, but I never want to present the Black community in a deficit. It's really about highlighting the barriers, but also the successes that we've made as a community. And I have 2 screens, so I have some data on my other screen. What I'll say is there are some positives. First, though, what I'll say is that the Black community is really robust and it's actually set to double from now to 2041. And notably, the Black population is actually younger, the median age, than the general population. So the median age of Black people is about 30 years, whereas for the overall population, it's just at 41. And that's important because as we're talking about ways to provide work integrated learning or programs for Black youth, we see that Black youth are actually, like, the Black youth population is larger than the youth population of the general population, which is interesting. There are some positives, like I said, when we're talking about education. So Black Canadians now have a university graduation rate comparable to the general population at about 56.3% of individuals holding a post-secondary credential in 2021, which is great. So we've made strides. What I will say is supporting Black youth really starts at the very early entry levels of education. I think it's important for us to talk about the kinds of curriculum that we're providing to Black youth, because as you'll see when I talk about employment, if we're socializing Black youth into all these different opportunities and industries, that can have a translation into the kind of jobs that they see themselves in, or whether they want to go into entrepreneurship, for example. But it's important to have a curriculum that is both honest about slavery, the experiences of Black people, et cetera, while also highlighting the amazing achievements that Black individuals have had in Canada and how they've contributed. It's also important to have Black educators in the space. And when I talk about a couple of our programs like Study Buddy, even thinking of Black tutors matching with Black students, because that allows Black tutors to have a leadership opportunity when Black students are represented in the individuals that they're actually getting knowledge from. But it's to say, overall, we've made some great strides when it comes to education, but we can't forget these 2 really critical pieces on the curriculum we teach and the importance of educators, mentors, peer learning, et cetera. As we go into employment, I wanted to highlight an inclusive career path wraparound supports, kind of a model that we've been using when we're thinking about our work integrated learning, when we're moving from education to employment. And early when we first started this session, we talked about some of the structural barriers. So when we're looking to put programs in place that move Black youth from education to employment, it's important to think about all of the wraparound supports that are needed to facilitate that. So you're thinking of childcare, access to technology, mental health support, career counseling, networking, flexible training opportunities, etc. And why I raise that in the context of data collection is because it's only through robust disaggregated data collection that we actually understand some of these structural barriers that exist for Black youth, that then we can feed into the programs that we design and deliver so that Black youth are in schools, they know all the opportunities that exist, they go through work integrated learning opportunities, they have better employment outcomes, they maybe go into entrepreneurship, etc. So all that to say is I think data is a really critical piece in understanding the barriers to build into the programs. I'll go briefly over this because my colleague Lorene will be back to talk about it, but our Study Buddy program was one of the examples of having a tutor-based program for primarily Black and Indigenous students. It trained about 120 students. And like I said, I think it was so impactful because you have tutors that get the leadership opportunities and you have the students that get to learn from, I wouldn't say a peer because it's someone who's older, but nevertheless, like someone who has lived experience, et cetera, as they're transitioning into the workplace. And even something like the advanced digital and professional training for Black youth. Similarly, a lot of these people were actually the tutors from Study Buddy, but ultimately it provides tailored training to prepare participants to work in different industries like information, communication, technology. And that is a great segue into the slide that I'll show after, because again, we want to make sure that Black youth understand the full scope of opportunities that exist and aren't siloed into one direction in employment. Segueing into employment, and this is kind of an interesting graph because it comes from StatsCan, and the percentages are quite small. That's just because they had a very long laundry list of different sectors that people can work in. But it's to say that it looks like, and again, sorry, because the numbers are small, but most people are working in health sectors when it comes to the Black community, followed by manufacturing and utilities. And the lowest percentage is management. Again, being transparent that the numbers are small. And that's totally fine. If people like working in health, that's great. It's a great career opportunity. But it's just, again, pairing that with some of the things we heard from education about ensuring that Black youth have the full gamut of opportunities so that they can go into these different sectors. And when we collect this kind of disaggregated data and we put it into a report like the SOBER report, we're a better place to say, okay, maybe it looks like a lot of Black individuals are in this sector. What could we do to broaden their opportunities? In the same way that if you're thinking of gender divides at a very young age, there's some data that shows that girls will rank themselves less in math and science, even though their testing results don't actually resonate with that sentiment. And then you see fewer women in STEM. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen for Black individuals and Black women. We know that experiences of discrimination are still alive and well in the workplace. And some of our data that exists in the SOBER report explains this. And I do have some data on the experiences of Black women too. That's not on the slide that I'll show you. But when you look at the data, it shows that Black individuals, 47% of those that we surveyed from our Environics Future Skills and Diversity Institute study experienced some kind of discrimination in the workplace. And you can think of a whole host of different kinds of discrimination, microaggressions and being invalidated, even the use of informal networks to get opportunities where Black individuals may not actually have access to this kind of networking. In fact, I'll just flip over to my other slide, or my other screen. A study of 845 people found that over half of Black respondents had experienced at least one microaggression, including comments like, well, I'm not racist, I have Black friends. So it's to say that discrimination still exists in the workplace and it can be hard to quantify. But why I think the data is so important is because I imagine that many of you on the line have experienced things like this. And when we're actually able to collect that, then we can put a real picture to it. And it's not to say that your experiences are not valid on their own, but I think data always helps in telling the story. Something I don't have on the slide that exists in your copy of the slides is this gender breakdown of discrimination, where we see that 38% of Black women and 30% of Black men experience this kind of discrimination, compared to 26% of women and 12% of men overall. So when you break it down, Black women actually have a much higher percentage of experiencing discrimination than women broadly, and than Black men. So intersectionality is important here. And we wouldn't know that if we didn't collect the data. I mean, we would have the qualitative stories and experiences, which are also still valid, though. I'll pivot into leadership. And what I will say is there's some positives. This is 2024 data on the representation of people in the workplace generally, or the population, compared to representation on boards. The green is percent of the population, and the blue is representation on boards. And if I had shown you a comparison, you would have seen that Toronto has actually closed their gap significantly. But if you're still looking at places like Ottawa, you see that the Black population is 7.6% of the population, and they represent about 4.9% of board of directors. So still a ways to go across Canada, but some of the gaps have closed, which I think is really promising. What's not promising is some of the data that I don't have on the screen for you. It shows that among S&P TSX index organizations that we studied, 81.3 of boards and 85% of executive teams had no Black leaders. That's really important. That's well over half. In the 80s, had no Black individuals in leadership roles. So again, collecting this data is important because as I'm taking you through this pipeline, you see we start early with supporting Black youth through education, curriculum, work integrated learning. It feeds into the kinds of industries and jobs that people get, and it feeds into leadership opportunities. It's a whole lifespan. And that's how we're collecting data so that you can leverage that for your programming. I'll wrap up on entrepreneurship, and then I'll just give you a brief taste of the way forward. And I think there's a question on this too when we get to the panel that I'm happy to answer. But it's to say that we do see Black individuals creating exceptional businesses that really strengthen the economy in Canada. But we do see that Black individuals are still underrepresented when it comes to entrepreneurship opportunities. You can take a look at the graph overall compared to the total population, for example. And there's some other experiences. Black entrepreneurs tend to own smaller businesses compared to white entrepreneurs. Black entrepreneurs are 1.4% times likely. Black entrepreneurs are 1.4 times less likely to have 5 or more employees compared to other businesses. So it's to say that they tend to be small. And thus, while it's important for supporting Black entrepreneurs and starting, it's also important to help them scale. And that really comes through capital as well, capital and networking. And so we have a whole section on the SOBR report on some of the experiences of lending, borrowing, and the barriers that Black entrepreneurs experience. But I'll link that back to the pipeline and again, supporting Black youth. And it's to say that Black youth need to have an understanding of what entrepreneurship looks like, how they can get into the space, et cetera, so that they have the tools if they want to go here versus traditional employment. There's a number of programs that exist to support Black entrepreneurs. I won't go through this slide in depth, but you do have it on your end. I'll wrap up here the way forward. I think I have 2 more slides. It's to say that barriers exist at the societal, organizational, and individual levels, but that also means that opportunities for change exist at these levels too. When you're thinking of societal level opportunities, these are things like legislation, big policy items like childcare, transportation, things like that, that are really the structural barriers and supports that exist. When you're talking about organizations, this can be anything from education organizations to businesses themselves, and how they're baking in an anti-Black racism lens into their work through their employment processes, through their service design and delivery. And then we can't forget the societies and organizations are actually made up of all of you. Sometimes I think that when we think about systems, we take the person out of it, but it's really about all of our role in supporting Black youth and finding pathways. And here is our diversity assessment tool. And what I'll just share is that it really emphasizes that opportunities to address anti-Black racism and to collect data on the experiences of Black individuals and Black youth exist across the whole gamut of an organization, from your human resource processes to representation and leadership, to your culture and values, and whether Black students feel like they belong, whether Black individuals feel a sense of belonging in their organization, across the value chain and the services you provide, your marketing, as well as the partnership and the philanthropic efforts that you engage in. So it's just to say that it doesn't exist in one bucket, it's throughout. And if you're looking for some kind of capacity building resources, I'm happy to share them. But I think that was my time. So thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you so much, Nancy. That was a great overview, a great baseline to introduce our next two speakers. I have the honor of introducing Andre McDonald, the director from the Elite Program for Black Youth at the University of Alberta, and Kofi Hope, co-founder of Monumental. And to get us started, I wanted to just give you each a couple of minutes to talk about who you are, where you come from, the program that you're running, and to just give us a little overview to kick off the panel. So I'm going to start with Andre, please. The floor is yours for 5 minutes, Andre.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you as well to Future Skills Center for organizing this event, and to Nancy, thank you so much. That was a great presentation, thoroughly and enjoyed it. And to those who are online, thank you for joining us as well. So, as Laura mentioned, my name is Andre McDonald. I'm a professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering and the immediate former Associate Vice President for Strategic Research Initiatives and Performance here at the U of A. So the ELITE program, the Experiential Learning in Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship program, is a work integrated training program for Black youth between the ages of 15 and 22. We are located here in Edmonton, but we do attract interns and students from across Canada who will come to Edmonton to work with industry, academics, or with government agencies that are focused on STEM activities as a part of their project-based work. So the three elements of the program involve paid work integrated training over a 35-hour per week time frame between 8 and 16 weeks for high school students and undergraduate students as well. And then the wraparound activities that we build into the program involve entrepreneurship design series in collaboration with the Black Business Ventures Association and Edmonton Unlimited, where we provide UX, UI design of a business to students. It's all very experiential. And we look at giving them opportunities on how to do customer calls, how to finance a business, how to create it. And then they do 2 or 3 pitch presentations over an 8-week period. Because we acknowledge that, as Nancy, mentioned as well in her opening remarks, that Black youth may face some barriers, but we want to take it from the perspective of strength, of empowerment. So we also include a wellness and coaching series into the program that is led by a professor, Dr. Sophie Ioane, out of the Faculty of Education here at the University of Alberta, as a registered clinical psychologist that works with a team of facilitators in the PhD program or who are seeking their provisional license here in Alberta to really support the youth through coaching and counseling across the hope scale, and really looking at working to build their capacity to be mentors, to be self-advocates, and to really be able to prepare them for working in the professional fields and all the stresses and triggers that may come with that. But then also looking at it through the lens of building socio-emotional capacity as well for them. That is the approach of the program, and the main emphasis for us is the paid STEM-based work integrated training supported by industry partners, academic partners who provide the training, as well as government agencies like Alberta Health Services and others. Over the past 5 years, since we've been working on this program, we've been able to secure about $4 million in funding to support the salaries and the benefits of the youth, as well as the wraparound services, and have created over 300 jobs for youth through the program, and provided work integrated training as well to them. But we have made a contextual shift recently, and we have been told that we need to start earlier. And this really, again, aligns with Nancy's points, right? So we've actually started to working at providing STEM summer camps for Black youth between grades 1 and 9, because our focus was on grades 10 through to university. And that has had an enormous community response. And we were able to receive an NSERC Promo Science grant last year to support this program. So now we'll be able to take on 100 summer camp students for 2-week camps in STEM, looking at a variety of different activities from grade 1 to grade 9, positioning them for the elite program and jobs of the future. So that will be our pivot. And also we're looking at working with those who are youth who are interested in the skilled trades as well, boiler making, manufacturing, other broader areas as well. And that's something that we have heard some feedback on. So we are working with some of the trade unions now to design a new platform for working with Black youth who would like to go into the skilled trades in order to give that diversity of opportunities. Again, as Nancy had mentioned, so really great alignment with our next steps and alignment with some of the previous work that we've done before. So thank you very much for allowing me to introduce that. And I'd like to turn the floor back over to you, Laura. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Andre. It's really great to hear about the evolution. And now I'm going to pass it to Kofi to talk about Monumental's work and future builds.
Thanks, Laura. So good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Kofi, so CEO and leader of Monumental, and we're a Toronto-based kind of consulting and strategy firm. We do research, we do programming, we do design processes, and tend to work around city-based issues, places where there's an intersection of kind of urban equity, but also helping major institutions to be more impactful and effective in the work they do. I'll just say that for my time at Monumental, a lot of my career was in the social service sector. I had the privilege of helping found the C Center for Young Black Professionals and be the inaugural ED, which is now the largest charity in Canada that serves Black youth. So workforce development around Black youth was kind of a core part of most of my career, and then moved to Monumental, where we have a social purpose business, but a huge part of what we do is about uplifting BIPOC communities and helping kind of create solutions to some of the biggest pressing social issues of our times. And Future Builds is part of that. And it's an interesting story with Future Builds where it really follows the ideal Monumental kind of life cycle for a program, where it started with an issue that we noticed. So my business partner and I, Zara Ibrahim, through the work of Monumental, did a lot of work in the real estate development space. So we were involved in projects around some of the biggest actually land development projects in Canada. So the work in Regent Park, which for folks who don't know is the largest public housing community in Canada and has gone through a revitalization over the last 20 years. We were working there. We were working with the Downsview development in North Toronto, which is going to bring 100,000 people. It's like a city within the city. Over the next 30 years, 100,000 people will be moving into that development right in the center of Toronto. We've been working with CLC, where they have about 400 acres of land they're developing in Ottawa. So we got really close actually to the real estate development industry. And what we noticed, maybe not surprising to folks, but disappointing to see, was as we were in the rooms, the kind of executive levels, the C-suites for these development companies, these construction firms, these planning firms, architecture firms, we didn't see many faces that looked like us, right? Very few racialized faces in general, and almost no Black faces at all. And when we started kind of talking to the Future Skills Center, who we'd known from kind of previous work we'd done, and we were talking to them about doing some research together, and we said, we know there's research in the United States which has looked at diversity challenges within real estate development, but there's nothing current or contemporary that exists about that in Canada. We would like to do something because we have a hunch that there's a gap there, and we also believe that there are solutions we have in mind, pulling from that toolbox from my days at sea, thinking that there could be incubator programs or cohort models or different things we could put in place, but we wanted to set an evidence base to say, what is the issue? What are we hearing that's needed? And then C was kind enough to grant us an initial research grant. We went and looked kind of across Canada, but a focus on the GTHA, both talking to professionals in the space, looking at the quantitative data, and we came out with our first research report, which said, yes, there's massive disparities when it comes to representation across the board in the industries that basically build the homes that we all live in and build the infrastructure in our cities and towns. But also on top of that, we have this confluence of the fact that we're in a housing crisis in Canada, that racialized communities and Black communities in the most pronounced way are the most impacted by that housing crisis, but the folks who are actually making the decisions about how we respond, who are planning our neighborhoods, who are building the homes, do not look like those most affected. And so there's a real need here, both from an ethical argument to say, hey, the folks who are most affected should be part of creating the solutions, but also, of course, from an economic development piece. This is one of the biggest industries in Canada. When we did the research, it was a very different housing market than it is today, but it was this growing industry which was making, tens of billions of dollars. And we said, if Black folks and people of color are not at the table and not in leadership roles in this industry, it's cutting them off from significant opportunities to build wealth, to build careers, and to see kind of economic mobility in this country. And so based on that research and what we learned, maybe I'll just say quickly, there were 3 areas that came up as the major barriers for BIPOC folks to move forward in the real estate development industry. The first was just the technical skills around it. People saying, real estate development's kind of like a black box, how these deals are made, how you do site selection for the land, how you actually bring all the different parts together to take a vacant site and put a tower or a townhouse in there. Many people didn't understand, and especially the things that weren't in textbooks, like about the relationship management and assembling teams and assembling, as they say in the industry, the capital stack required. People said, we don't have the social capital, right? We don't know the different people in the professional services or construction sides. You need to put a team together to work in this space. And then the last one was access to financing. And so we built Future Builds really to try to respond to those 3 issues. Much of our programming in Future Build has been open to BIPOC communities in general, but all of our events and programs have had majority Black participants. And this year, I was actually just there on Sunday, yeah. We launched Future Builds Next, which is our new Black youth-focused program. It's a cohort program which takes young Black leaders from across the GTA who are interested in solving the housing crisis and takes them on a journey to learn about not just real estate development in general, but specifically how do you develop affordable housing solutions to meet the needs of Black communities. And so we started with one pilot, which was more private sector, which was entrepreneurial, which we looked for the market opportunities. And we said, hey, we are interested. This isn't just a program about getting people to be real estate agents or in, planning or professional services. We see a niche for getting people to be in the lead, in the driver's seat of real estate development projects. So becoming entrepreneurs and leaders in the real estate development industry. And we saw an opening, a market opportunity, because, unless you are fabulously wealthy, if you want to start in real estate development, you're not starting by building a 40-story condo building, right? The amount of capital you need just makes it impossible. But a place that is an entry place that is accessible to folks in a certain, income bracket with a certain level of experience could be like, as I would say, you inherit your grandmother's house in Scarborough. It's a bungalow. You want to tear that down and build, say, 4 units of housing. That's the project size that people can actually start entrepreneurship in real estate development. And so there was, that was the scale that was possible, but the confluence was we're also in a period where municipalities across Canada are making it easier to to build at this level, what we call the missing middle of development. So kind of mid-scale developments, it's becoming easier from a planning perspective. There's now focus even in some of the investments to allow those opportunities. So we said this is an emerging part of real estate development. It's at the scale that works for our communities. Let's create Future Build as an incubator program to set folks up for that. We did the pilot. It was quite successful. I think 65% of the participants in it were Black. And now this year, Future Builds is a whole ecosystem of programming. We have another incubator program that's running right now where we have about 30 individuals who are part of it getting training who want to do that kind of missing middle, a first build to step on their journey to be a real estate entrepreneur. We have Future Builds Next, which is focused specifically on Black youth and building that next generation of leaders who understand how do we build affordable housing and solutions that work for our communities who are facing huge disparities in housing outcomes in the GTA. We have events, we're building an online curriculum, and in September, we'll be doing Future Builds XP, which will be a full day experience, which kind of is almost like a boot camp where you learn the material from our curriculum in a one-day experience at the Evergreen Brickworks in Toronto. So maybe I'll leave it there, but that is the programming we've developed. I'm happy to talk about the different pieces, but it's a mix of in-class, of mentorship, of field trips, experiential trips, of actual problem solving. And with our Future Builds Next program, we're taking a cohort of young Black leaders from Toronto to Halifax, Nova Scotia, to connect with Black Afro-Nova Scotian communities there and learn about how in a different context, Black folks, many times with access to land, are now putting together projects to deliver affordable housing solutions for their communities and then bring that knowledge back to work in the GTA.
Thank you so much for that, Kofi. That's great to hear. Another example of how things are expanding and changing with the program. I want to tackle a couple of the questions that we're getting online, and I want to encourage people to use the Q&A to submit their questions for both Kofi and Andre, as well as Nancy, who we'll bring back in a minute. But I want you to get into a little bit more of the weeds of like what program elements of Future Builds as well as the Elite program really make it sing, that make it successful. And there's a couple questions in the Q&A, one for Andre around, are there considerations for people participating in Elite around accommodations and travel and living expenses? And just to clarify, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, Kofi, but I'll let you answer it. In terms of the focus of Future Builds is just on the GTA. So who wants to go first? Let's go back to Andre for a minute and just talk about some of the program elements that really are successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So, and thanks to the audience member for that question as well. So I would certainly say that the main program element that is very impactful, as some of you on the call may expect, would be the paid work integrated training components. So it is successful because it is truly a community industry government partnership between the interns who are actually doing the work as projects with the hosts and the hosts themselves. So it's really something that we see as being very symbiotic, right? Where the host is actually getting a benefit from the expertise of some very, very brilliant young Black youth who are keyed into STEM, whether or not it's on AI, manufacturing, programming, design, you name it. And these are folks who are 16 years old, 17 years old, right? And the companies are getting this clear benefit from the youth to build out their projects. But the youth are getting an even greater, in my opinion, an even greater benefit because now they're embellishing their resumes, they're building their capacity. And after 2 to 4 months of the programming, the actual work training part, the project-based exercises, the students seem very confident at the end. The way how they speak, the way how they articulate, right? They seem, very ready to move forward to the next stage. Where's the evidence for this? The evidence is that after the Elite program is completed, we do make offers to some students the following years to come back and work with us. They accept initially, and then they apologize a few months later saying they got a better, higher paying job before they graduated as a result of the experience in the Elite program. And they were telling us that they would like us to give that opportunity to another young person, right? That is one of the most impactful things that we've seen coming out of the program. And that's why, I highlight that kind of work integrated component. The other components are very important, but they support that main core component of getting the youth jobs very early in their academic and career training. So I'll just maybe put that out there as a major success for now, Laura.
Great, thanks. Kofi.
So the question was around, are we exclusively in the GTA?
Are you exclusively in the GTA? And I'd love you to get into a little bit more detail about like the program elements that really make it work.
Sure. So just quickly on the first part, then, we currently, yes, we're focused in the kind of GTHA, right, Greater Toronto Hamilton area. But that being said, and you can go today to our kind of Future Builds website, which we can put in the chat. Much of our curriculum material is already online. We have an online wiki from the kind of 1.0 program that's there. We're also currently filming videos and lectures and creating new content that will have an even more robust and in-depth curriculum, which will be available for the end of September. So folks who are interested in it, and our hope is to build a model where we could kind of, bring this program nationally. Both we would love to do it ourselves in certain contexts, but also give people the structure to run their own cohorts and have the online learning resources that could give you kind of the lectures and the contents, and then you could create the mentorship and the kind of fellowship components in real life to make it work, so that we could really scale this from coast to coast. I would say before I transition to the second part that it makes a lot of sense for us to do this. We're based in Toronto, and so that's where we've been doing the work. But the reality is the price of land, as I think probably all of us would know, in Toronto is incredibly high, and it makes it incredibly prohibitive to step into real estate development if you don't have a huge amount of capital already in hand. And so even many of the folks we work with, they don't do their first projects like in downtown Toronto. They're going to more kind of secondary markets. They're going to Niagara Falls. They might be going to London, Ontario. They might be going to other places to start to build some capital, to build, something on that earnings sheet they can show to the bank to then do larger projects. And so I think in many ways, future builds actually would be even more successful outside of our region in different parts of the country where the kind of cost of entry to get into developing and building housing is lower than it is where it's so prohibitive here in the GTA. What can I say about the program? Well, one thing I would say, and maybe I'll talk about future builds next, and this was a lesson I learned building the C Center for Young Black Professionals, and we did interviews with youth across Toronto when we were building that. And one of the key things those young people said, which we've used in future builds next, is they said, "There's nothing for us in this city." It's a city where we're facing, streaming and discrimination in schools, where we're getting followed and stopped by the police, where we're getting weird looks from people when we just try to take the TTC to go to work. All the time, it feels like public spaces, private spaces, everything in between are not for us. And so the value of coming to, and they have this we have a wonderful site now in Scarborough, to come to a space where it's just pictures of Black youth on the walls. It's people that look like us in the staff, and we are welcome and we are celebrated and brought in, regardless of whether I got my hat pulled on and tattoos on my neck, or whether I'm wearing a full suit and tie. Whatever expression of my Black experience I'm living, I'm welcome and embraced is so important. And so that's one of the key pieces, rooting identity in what we do for communities that have been systemically marginalized and stereotyped for 400 years in the Western world, to have a place that says, we see you as you are, and it is amazing and it is beautiful, and we want you to continue to explore and deepen your Black journey here. And so when we did our retreat over the weekend, we had Brother Nation Chung, who's a vice president at United Way Toronto, opened it up with drumming. We brought people in. Everyone took a moment. You had to bring an artifact that symbolized your heritage, put it on a table at the center of the circle, and give a story about your heritage and your culture and upbringing. And we spent like an hour before we even talked about housing or affordability to just root ourselves in our identity and who we were. And throughout the day, we had time where we had lunch with elders. We had brought in Quentin Versetti, who's an Afrofuturist who's done, is building like bronze statues of Black leaders that are in public spaces across Canada. He did an art-based activity. So throughout it, even though we were learning technical skills and building understanding connected to a specific industry, also a celebration of Black identity and culture and role modeling is deeply woven into what we do. And that going to Nova Scotia will be similar to that. We'll be learning about housing. We're also going to visit Africville. We're going to then learn about how folks who are displaced from Africville went to Uniacke Square. We're going to go to North Preston, East Preston, see about kind of the history of folks that goes back to the Black Loyalists. So I'll say that's maybe one of the secret sauces, is weaving identity throughout it. And even in our incubator, which is for different backgrounds, we're bringing in people from all the diverse communities in Toronto who've been incredibly successful in real estate development, who can role model that success, who can talk about what is it like to be a racialized woman going onto a construction site where people are misidentifying you all the time and you're like, no, actually this is my site, and what that experience is like. So we had Sherry Larjani talking about that at one of our talks, who has been a very successful developer in the city. And so, you know, that role modeling piece is huge. And the last piece I'll talk about is, you know, really creating individualized content around people's specific entrepreneurial problems or contexts. And this year we've gotten really big on that. We have workbooks where people can really talk about the site they're looking at. They can look at building typologies. They can match that. Then we have interactive sessions where we bring in architects and planners who will work with people around their site. And we have mentorship groups around different building typologies. So the folks who just want to add an auxiliary unit to their existing home, they have a working group. For the folks who want to do like 4 units, they have a working group. For those ambitious ones who want to do 8 to 10 units, they have a working group with an industry expert where they can circle up, they can share experiences in their journey, they can do peer-to-peer learning, and they can get expert support. And that's been core to this, to say so much of this is folks trying to break into an industry where you don't see folks like us, and where if you want professional services, you're paying by the hour to get that insight. So just to meet a city planner, we did a partnership with the City of Toronto with our first cohort. We paired every member of the program with a planner at the city and just said, now you have a warm contact at the city that you can call, ask questions. That was like the top piece that we added in the program, because we just didn't know. They just weren't in communities that knew a lot of folks who had planning degrees, who were at City Hall. So having a real face-to-face connection of someone who said, yeah, when you're having an issue with your project, when you don't understand about the committee of adjustment, reach out and call to me. That made all the difference in the world. So community and connection and identity are really the glue that keep together the technical training and other elements of our curriculum.
Thanks for that, Kofi. There's a question here, and it links up with something that I'm wondering about as well, in terms of like current partnerships, opportunities that you guys are looking for to support the program. I think, you know, your last anecdote, Kofi, really highlighted one of those partnerships. But curious as well about the experience working, and maybe this is more for Andre, but working with employers specifically, and what that experience has been like.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Laura, very quickly. So, you know, a part of the design of the LEAD program, and this was done intentionally because we are a STEM-facing program, was really to ensure that the folks who are providing the training to youth are actually those who could potentially hire them in the future as a part of our strategy. So what we have done, and this has seemed to work really well, is to engage with the potential employers and ask them to serve as internship hosts for the youth, but then also to give us a sense of what the nature and quality of the projects should actually be that would be commensurate with the experience of the youth who are coming in. So for a high school student, if they would be open to a high school student, can they tailor projects that would support their educational level and give them meaningful experiences? And in other cases, can they be a bit more specific around the disciplines that they would need from an undergraduate student working through the program? And that has actually been a very positive experience. The employers have been very engaged. They have been very forthcoming with giving advice, with giving support. Some of them have even gone as far as to say, we want to hire the students through the LEAD program. We want them to do the entrepreneurship design series and the wellness and coaching series as a part of wraparound services. But guess what? We will cover the cost of their salaries, allowing you to then hire additional students and enlarge the program. So that level of support has actually been there, which is great. Other employers have actually used the LEAD program as a test bed for potential new employees when they complete their training. That has also worked very well for us. I do remember an anecdotal situation where an employer actually wanted to hire an undergraduate student to keep on working while they were going to school. The student had to say, no, I can't, because I do have to take 6 courses as an undergraduate student, so they wouldn't have the ability to work the job. But that just really signals, again, the amount of engagement and commitment from the employers to really bringing on the youth. And a final point that I'll make is I did not get a sense that employers were looking to hire the youth because they were Black, or because they were Black and immigrant, or Black and woman, right? They were really looking to hire the students because they were good at the work that they were doing, and they were actually getting a higher productivity through the projects. So I think it was more about the skill sets and about the relationship with the employer that really resulted in them wanting to continue the relationship with the interns beyond the elite program, creating more jobs, in Edmonton and across Canada. And just to emphasize, students would come from Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver or Calgary to come here because they specifically wanted to work with certain industry because it built their careers, and then they went back home to their local cities. So it's so far very positive, and hope this can serve as a model for other programs going forward. Back to you, Laura. Thank you.
Kofi, did you want to weigh in on that one around experiences with employers or other partnerships that you're kind of seeking to build going forward?
Talk a lot about experience with employers but from my previous life running a workforce development charity, I would just say, you know, to make this work, from my experience when we were at sea, there's both the supply and the demand side, right? So much of workforce development has been about the supply. Like, we're going to get Black youth skilled up and ready to succeed in the job market. And you can do that. And I think there's great programs that do it. The demand side, or the employer side, I think is kind of the final frontier, because we would train so many young people, and very different setting than Andre and the youth he's working with. But we were at sea, we were looking at those who were furthest from the labor market. So in precarious housing, had been in conflict with the law, and they were getting really entry-level positions. But the issue was, we could train a young person in the culinary program, but when we put them in the employer, they come back to us and say, well, the supervisor's racist, the job is really tough, the conditions are really awful, I'm out. And so we realized that it wasn't simply enough to prepare our young people to succeed. We also had to engage with the employers themselves to say, hey, if these are workplaces that are fundamentally hostile to Black bodies, doesn't matter how much training we can give, how many resume workshops, how many showing up to work on time, how much even social wraparound supports, you've got to kind of meet us halfway or part of the way there by doing that internal work about the work environment you're producing and the conditions of that work to make it hospitable for Black folks. And so I'll just put that as a comment, and it's something we're less directly working with the employers in these programs, but I think that is ultimately part of it. And it then becomes so important to find the right employers and industry partners, people who aren't doing it to check something off on their kind of ESG report, but truly see a need and a desire, and see the value in bringing more young Black people into their workplace, and are also willing to do that internal work around training, around management, around performance management, around equitable leadership, to ensure that they are not hostile environments for these young people, but places they can not just survive, but thrive.
Thank you for that, Kofi. We're getting to the end of our time together, and I know you guys have spoken about this a little bit already, but I would love to end on the note of like looking forward. What does the future look like for the program, for your organizations, and what are you hopeful about moving into the future?
Did you want to start with me?
Go ahead, Andre. Yeah.
Yeah, so for the elite program, I would definitely say, it's a bit of what we're already doing, but I just want to re-emphasize it because it's so important. It's around the socioeconomic upward mobility of youth through the career pathway, through the work, integrated training pathways, but in partnership with those in community. And community for us means industry, government groups, and others, but especially industry, because our goal is to continue to create jobs for youth. We want to get them working, we want to get them paid, and we want to, leave it to them to decide where they go after that. But in terms of future pivot, we are acknowledging that we do need to spend some time building the pipeline more. I think that is something that is probably lacking in the Canadian ecosystem that we do need to strengthen. But again, sorry to have to call on Nancy so much, but that presentation was really nice with the data. We're getting results. We're moving forward, right, in the right direction, which is very positive for for us in Canada. So our pivot next steps is to work with the younger generation, grades 1 to grade 9, to really start to do more preliminary engagement in a way that is conducive to someone in grade 9. I will tell you that I actually thought as a mechanical engineer that someone who is in grade 1 or grade 2 could work for 8 hours a day in a camp. I was told by my education colleagues, no, 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 no. You need to give them a chance for a break. They need to run around. They need to do gardening, playing, break time, and then they will come back. So really tailoring programming to within STEM, but then to meet the needs of the demographic group, I think is very important for the elite program. And we are also learning as well, and really, stepping into that direction. Our pilot studies have really shown great engagement from parents, great engagement from the grade 1 to grade 6 students. The grade 7 to 9 have also been very engaged, but it was amazing to see such young children participating in these 2 to 4 weeks summer camps that we fully cover the cost of, by the way, to make sure that we're breaking down those financial barriers and getting earlier youth involved in the programming, in the hopes that this will then fill in longer term programs like the elite programs that are setting up youth for jobs and then setting them up for careers when they finish university, trade school, or whatever direction they choose to take for their academic training. So that is our next step. This is a big, exciting time for us. We've only been at that earlier cohort for about a year now, and we're very excited by the amount of community engagement that we've been getting and the support that we've been getting as well from them in bringing the children and the youth to us, and creating the trust that actually is needed to get that done. So thank you so much, Laura. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Kofi. You've got a couple of minutes, the last word on the panel, and then I'll pass it back to Christian.
Great. So when we're thinking about the future of the program, maybe I'll talk about 2 things. One is I think there is tremendous opportunity for expansion when it comes to the more affordable housing side, when it comes to creating housing solutions for our Black communities, right? The issues are there and government is aware of it. Like in the city of Toronto, 20 years ago, the face of homelessness was predominantly more middle-aged, white male who had mental health or substance abuse issues. Today, the growing face of homelessness in Toronto is young Black men. They're increasingly the ones showing up in the shelter system, and the shelter system wasn't built to meet their needs. So there's an RFP out right now saying we need a Black-focused shelter in Toronto because we're not meeting the needs. And across the spectrum of housing needs, whether it's discrimination around trying to rent a property, whether it's access to home ownership, whether it's, just building ethno-specific affordable housing or long-term care, government understands that we need Black-focused solutions, and money is starting to show up. The problem is, whether it's the City of Toronto or CMHC or other municipalities groups we're talking to, funding is showing up, but because of historical barriers, there isn't necessarily the capacity within Black communities to say, take $20 million and build a long-term care facility. There isn't necessarily the money for Black agencies to win that bid around building a Black-focused shelter and do all of the programming themselves. And so more and more, we're seeing governments understanding the issue. They see the need. They're putting money forward, but they are saying to us, hey, we're not finding a large enough pool of Black organizations or professionals who can deliver in this new world order we're in, where we need things tomorrow, right? They need to be right away. And so we're more and more saying, how do we marry our programming with new funding opportunities right? So that we can help create that pipeline. And even if a Black agency gets that funding to say build affordable housing, they know how to meet the community's needs. They've got the wraparound supports. They've got good governance. They don't have deep technical skill about how you take, that parking lot and put up a building there. How do we partner with that? So along with just providing money, government can also provide culturally specific capacity building to organizations. So we see that as a huge area of growth, and we're talking to folks specifically around that. How do we take this model that works and marry it with the capital? Because that is the missing equation. It costs lots of money to build housing. The last thing I'd say, as far as where we see growth, and I'm so happy to see some of the offers in the chat, is we want to take this work national. We want to build those connections, right? We know that housing issues are faced by Black communities, unfortunately, from coast to coast. So we see that there could be real use both for our ability to help build entrepreneurs within our community and to support capacity around affordable housing and nonprofit housing. And so we're looking forward to ways that we can use the online curriculum, use our expertise, and create satellite chapters in cities and towns across Canada, and even that national network. There is a growing Black housing ecosystem in Canada, and we want to continue to help expand that. GTA, we have about 40% of the Black population in the country here. There's actually lots of capital. As I mentioned, there aren't always the best development opportunities in the GTA. But why can't folks from Toronto team up with folks in Calgary and build housing out there? Other communities do that. They don't just stay in their own city. They look for the best market opportunities and they move the capital there. And so creating pathways and opportunities for those collaborations, I think there's plenty of, we have all the pieces to the puzzle. If you think about Black Canada nationally, it's how do we begin to collaborate and break down some of the silos and historic separation so that we can do great things together on a national scale. And so that's a part of what we're really looking forward to do. Our first baby step that way, as we said, is bringing Black leaders, young Black leaders from Toronto to Halifax, but we'd love to continue doing that, to come out west and kind of go coast to coast.
Well, I think you've got a few offers in the chat, Kofi, to start building out that national expansion. So that's great. Thank you both, Andre, Kofi, and Nancy, for joining us today. And I'm going to pass it back to Christian.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Kofi, Andre, and Nancy for very powerful insights today. I had a few key takeaways prepared, but because we are out of time, I am sure that each individual attendees will have some things they can reflect on going forward. Just to quickly say, FSC is encouraging you to explore the resources shared and continue this conversation in your organizations and communities. Some resources will be included in the separate email sent later. And one last thing, please take a moment to complete our survey. It's very short. There will be a pop-up window when you exit Zoom. So your feedback helps us grow and improve. And please follow us on social media, Blue Sky. We are on Blue Sky, but also on LinkedIn. So thank you again for your presence and engagement, and see you next time.